They said I wasn't built for business, and they said it where I could hear. My name is Tess Marlowe, and I learned to count profits standing on a milk crate, ringing up customers in my father's hardware store after school. I learned to read people by handing them change and noticing who lingered to talk, and who stared past me like I was part of the register. That store smelled like cedar shavings and WD-40. When Dad died, the shelves kept their smell, but the accounts did not keep their balance. I sold the lease, paid the debts, and promised myself I would not wear grief like a sign around my neck. Years later, I interviewed at Kestrel Logistics as a mid-level operations manager. It was a gray Wednesday in February. The lobby had a wall of watered plants and a receptionist who smiled with only her mouth. I wore the suit I had tailored after the sale of the store, the one that made me stand taller. The interview panel had 3 men and a woman. The men called me "young lady" twice. The woman kept her eyes lowered to the notes like she was reading weather reports. "We're a tough culture," said the head of operations. "Long weeks, sharp elbows." "I handle sharp elbows," I replied. "They just bruise." They offered me the job a week later, less than I asked, more than I needed. I took it, because I liked maps and trucks and the puzzle of moving something from a cold dock to a warm kitchen without wasting fuel, time, or patience. The company's offices stretched across 2 floors, with glass walls that showed you every meeting you were not invited to attend. I learned the routes, the contracts, the petty politics, and the quiet kindness of the night shift, who stacked pallets like cathedral builders. 2 months in, I presented a plan to redesign our cross-docking schedule. It would cut idle time by 9%. I had run the numbers 3 ways. I had mocked up the plan with colored tape on the warehouse floor. In the weekly leadership meeting, I kept my voice level and my slides clean. The COO, a man named Ian with polished vowels and a watch that cost more than my car, looked at me like I had spilled coffee on his desk. "Ambitious," he said, and smiled. "But you're thinking like a clerk." The room made a soft sound, like fabric pulled tight. I said nothing. I kept my hands on my notebook, the one with Dad's initials penciled under the back cover for luck. After the meeting, in the hallway near the break room, I heard them, voices lowered, laughter like coins slipping into a slot. "She will burn out," someone said. "She can't handle the politics," someone else added. "Good with lists, not with people." I stood under the humming light and watched the coffee drip. I stirred mine with a wooden stick and thought about the way criticism lands. It does not break you at once. It wears a groove, and the groove guides your steps, and one day you look up and realize the path is not yours. That night, I took the late bus home. I sat by the window and counted the warehouse bays in my head, then started counting something else. How many contracts came up for renewal each quarter? How many shippers were concentrated under 3 large clients? How much debt the company carried? Numbers are generous when you ask them honest questions. In bed, staring at the ceiling, I remembered the last thing Dad told me when we closed the store. "You choose the box you stand on," he said. "Make sure it lets you see." The next morning, I walked into work and said good morning to everyone whose names never appear on the homepage. I did my job with care. I saved my anger like rainwater. The first spark of tension lit quietly, the way a pilot light clicks on before you notice the heat. I would not fight for a chair at their table. I would build the house next door. Kestrel was a collection of edges. Promotions were announced on Fridays, after lunch, when everyone was tired. Mistakes were broadcast on Mondays, as if shame could sharpen performance. I kept my head down and my eyes open. I listened to drivers who knew which docks had crooked planks and which foreman played favorites. I learned how our software lagged behind invoices by 2 days, and how those 2 days kept certain numbers flattering. My boss, a brisk woman named Paula, liked me in the way a gardener likes a good hose. Useful, but easy to coil and hang. She sent me to fix 4 different regions in 6 months. I trimmed routes, renegotiated fuel surcharges, and turned overtime into scheduled shifts with clean handoffs. Each success came back to me in a smaller circle, like a stone skimming water. The credit rolled uphill. The criticism rolled down. At a quarterly review, Ian the COO nodded through my report, then closed the folder with a polite thud. "You're reliable," he said. "You'd make a strong deputy. Think about where you'd like to support." I heard the word he did not say. Support. I smiled like a good sport. "I prefer leading teams," I said. "My projects have delivered consistent margin improvements." He tilted his head. "Leadership is more than spreadsheets, Tess." He used my name like a lesson. "Some people have the temperament for it. Others contribute in different ways." I walked out and took the stairs slowly. I texted my brother, who teaches shop class at the community college. I told him I felt like a tool in the wrong drawer. He sent back a hammer emoji and the words, "Hammers make their own drawers." There were dinners I was not invited to. There were golf weekends where decisions were made, and inside jokes formed like scar tissue. When the company landed a medium-sized grocery chain, the account went to a man who had never managed a cold chain in his life. He had, however, a golf handicap that fit the CEO's foursome. I trained him anyway, because the drivers deserved competence, whether or not the org chart did. I started documenting everything I could legally gather. Public filings. Vendor lists. The expiration dates on our debt covenants. The clauses in our largest contracts that allowed for penalties if on-time delivery fell below 97%. I kept these notes in a binder at home, behind a row of cookbooks my mother left me. I cooked from them on Sundays, her recipes balanced against my figures. Salt, then pepper. Risk, then mitigation. One night in late September, a driver named Miguel stopped by my desk. He wore the company fleece with pride, and his hands were always clean. "You listen," he said. "Most don't." "Listening gets me the map," I said. He pointed at a notice pinned near the break room. "They're cutting the seniority bump next quarter. It's quiet. People are scared." I took the notice down and read the fine print, my jaw steady. The cut would save little money and cost much trust. I brought it to Paula. She shrugged. "Morale is not on my scorecard." The phrase lodged under my ribs like a splinter. That night, I stood at my kitchen counter and looked at my binder. I could keep patching holes, or I could study the ship. There is a difference between fixing a leak and owning the hole. When the CFO hosted a town hall, I asked a careful question about interest coverage ratios. Heads turned. He offered a smooth answer that ignored the denominator. Afterward, he smiled at me in the hallway. "You read too much," he said. I thought of Dad rolling coins at the dining table, hands steady, eyes soft. The worlds we build rise from what we count as valuable. I walked back to my desk and reopened the routes. Inside, a steady oath formed, quiet as breath. If they kept telling me where I could stand, would not push against their hands. I would step back, measure the whole building, and find the deed. The proof arrived as a collection of small papers, then one crisp document with a watermark. It began when I noticed that Kestrel's largest competitor, Bayline Freight, missed their refinancing window by a quarter. Their stock flattened. Their private equity sponsor rotated out 2 partners. The market believed Bayline would be fine. The math said there was a gap. I met an old college friend for coffee, someone who now worked at a boutique advisory firm. Her name was Ria, sharp eyes, warm laugh. We had not talked in years. I told her I wanted a neutral view of the regional logistics landscape and said I could pay for a standard market scan. She slid a napkin across the table and drew 4 boxes. 2 incumbents, she said. 2 hungry minnows. I am interested in minnows, I said. The kind that school. She raised an eyebrow. You're not looking to jump ship, are you? I am looking to build one. She did not laugh. That was why I trusted her. 2 weeks later, she sent me a packet, legally sourced, publicly filed, carefully summarized. In it were Bayline's latest lender presentations, shipment volume trends, and a list of mid-size warehouses Bayline leased in our state. One line caught my eye. A lease set to expire at the end of the year, next door to 2 of our busiest cross-docks. If Bayline failed to renew, those bays would sit open, fat with possibility. I started flipping through county records on my nights and weekends. Industrial parcels, corporate shells, tax liens, truck permits. My binder grew heavy. I bought a second one. I labeled it Routes to Ownership with a piece of blue painter's tape. It felt like the kind of tape Dad used when he laid out shelving. Temporary, but precise. Then the watermark. An email from Rhea, subject line, term sheet. In the message, 1 sentence. You did not get this from me. Attached was a redacted term sheet from a lender willing to finance a roll-up of 2 small regional carriers, both family-owned, both profitable, both starved of growth capital. The lender offered leverage on fair terms if the buyer contributed meaningful equity. They preferred an operator who understood routing, labor, and thin margins. They preferred someone with a plan. I took a long walk. I turned down streets I did not know, then looked back under a sky that felt honest. At home, I printed the term sheet and slid it into the binder behind a plastic sleeve. Proof has a weight. It did not feel like hope. It felt like a ledger balancing in my hands. I called Rhea and asked to meet her lawyer. His name was Victor Rao, a soft-spoken man with careful words. We met in a small conference room with a plant that had survived by stubbornness alone. I told him everything, including the part where my savings were decent but not enough. He listened without interrupting, then asked me for a spiral notebook. I handed him one from my bag. He wrote 3 names. A retired operations VP from a national chain who now consulted part-time. A woman who ran a regional grocery cooperative and hated late deliveries. A banker at a community bank who still liked shaking hands over spreadsheets. You need partners who see you, Victor said. Not just your numbers. I went home and opened the cabinet where I kept my mother's recipes. Behind the cookbooks, the binders sat like patient animals. I turned the pages and touched the term sheet again. The numbers were real. The timing was tight, but the path was not fantasy. If I could assemble the equity, secure the financing, and time the leases, I could buy the 2 carriers, merge their best routes, and win the grocery cooperative's business away from Kestrel within 6 months. That would give me leverage with shippers and a seat at the table with landlords. It would not be easy. It would be honest work. I emailed Victor. I asked him to draft a clean list of steps. He replied within the hour. The subject line read, Sequence. The body held a staircase. Letters of intent, diligence, definitive agreements, filings, wire instructions. At the bottom, he wrote 2 words. Stay quiet. I folded the email like a letter, printed the staircase, and slid it beside the term sheet. Resolve did not roar. It settled over me like a good jacket. My hands were steady when I made the first call. I did not confront anyone with raised voices. The confrontation was a calendar, a boardroom, and a signature that moved weight from one column to another. I assembled equity from patient people who believed in trucking's unglamorous dignity. The community banker shook my hand and told me I reminded him of the woman who ran the town's grain elevator. The retired VP asked hard questions and then joined as an advisor. The cooperative's leader, a woman named Yara, requested a trial run with strict penalties for late deliveries. We hit 99% on time for 60 days. She signed a 1-year contract with options for 2 more. The lenders wired on a Tuesday morning in January. Victor texted me a thumbs up and the words, "We are live." We closed on Northline Transport by noon and Blue Harbor Freight by 3. I signed the merger documents with a felt-tip pen, my breath steady. When the last signature dried, I stood up and looked at the window. A row of trucks idled in the pale winter light. They looked like animals waiting for a gate to open. We announced the new company on Friday. Marlowe Logistics, lean and unfancy. On Monday, we met with landlords. Bayline had failed to renew one of the adjacent leases. We secured it, quietly, on fair terms. By February, our cross-dock network locked into place like a joint that had been waiting for the right hinge. The showdown with Kestrel came because of a meeting request I sent, polite and brief. To discuss a routing partnership, I wrote. It was true. I planned to offer Kestrel overflow capacity on 2 routes while we scaled a 3rd. It was also true that I wanted them to see me, not as support, but as a door they had not noticed. The conference room at Kestrel had glass walls, like always, and a long table that made small people occupy corners. Ian the COO arrived with 2 directors. Paula sat across from me, face blank as polished stone. Victor took a seat at my side, silent and observant. I placed a single folder on the table. Inside were our performance numbers, the contract with the cooperative, and a letter of intent we had received that morning. I began with the calm language of logistics. On-time percentages. Dwell times. Fuel hedges. I described the routes we could absorb and the rates we offered. I watched their eyes move from my face to the pages and back again, a rhythm of realizing. Ian cleared his throat. You left us to build a competitor, he said. The words were even, almost gentle. I left after you told me to support, not lead, I said. I built something that needed leading. He looked at Victor with the wary respect men reserve for other men in suits. You think this is sustainable, Mr. Rao? Victor folded his hands. The unit economics are solid. The contracts are disciplined. The team knows the work. Paula finally spoke. What do you want from us? Take the overflow, I said. Pay on 30 days. Treat the drivers on our lanes with respect. We will do the same. Ian tapped the folder. There is also a letter of intent here. Is that a sale process? It is a conversation, I said. We will only proceed if it keeps our workers whole. He smoothed the papers. He did not look at me. You could have pushed harder to belong here. I did, I said. Every day. You asked me to wait by the door. I bought the building next door instead. Silence spread through the room. It was not hostile. It was a recognition settling, the way dust settles after a shelf is moved. They had not expected quiet success to arrive like this, measured and prepared. They had expected a grudge to burn out, not a plan to mature. Ian sat back. We will take your overflow on the terms proposed. Thank you, I said. There was no victory music, no congratulatory toast. There was only the scrape of chairs and the soft shush of the folder sliding into a briefcase. As we stood, Paula met my eyes for 1 second. Something like regret crossed her face, then vanished. In the lobby, the receptionist smiled with the same mouth. Victor pressed the elevator button. You were colder than I have ever seen you, he said. I am not cold, I said. I am at temperature. The doors opened. We stepped in. Justice did not shout. It nodded once, and we went back to work. Marlowe Logistics grew like a garden tended daily. We hired slowly, promoted fair, and posted performance numbers where everyone could see them. I met with drivers on night shift and brought coffee strong enough to matter. We instituted a rule that managers spent one Friday a month in the yard. Anyone who disrespected loading crews learned how much a pallet actually weighs. By spring, we had added 2 new contracts, both earned on trial runs with tight penalties. We missed a window once in March because a farmer's fence line collapsed across a county road. The driver sent a photo, and we sent the farmer a crew after our delivery. The story made its way through the cooperative like a small, clean wind. They show up, people said. They fix what they touch. An investor from the letter of intent visited in April. He walked our floor, asked about our hedging, and nodded at the sight of supervisors lifting boxes with proper form. He made an offer. It was fair and boring, which is how good offers often look. I asked for time. I wanted to feel whether selling would be an ending or a bend in the path. On a mild Sunday morning, I opened the window above my kitchen sink. The air smelled like wet concrete and lilacs from the neighbor's yard. I pulled down Mom's recipes and reached behind them for my binders. The plastic sleeves had worn cloudy at the edges. The term sheet sat where I had left it. The staircase of steps still looked like a staircase, no longer steep. I added a new page. It was a printout of our latest on-time numbers and a photo of our drivers at a barbecue we hosted after a perfect month. People were laughing with their whole faces. It felt like profit, measured in dignity. The company I once worked for took our overflow through summer. Their checks arrived on time. I saw Ian once in a terminal outside the city. He nodded and said, "You were right about the crossdock design." I nodded back. "You were right about leadership being more than spreadsheets." We left it there, 2 people understanding that truth had finally found the right volume. Paula sent me a brief email in June. I recommended a woman on my team for the regional role, she wrote. I should have done it sooner. I replied with congratulations and meant it. Peace did not arrive as a parade. It arrived as a morning when I walked through our warehouse and heard only the sounds I loved. The chirp of a forklift. The hum of a compressor. The short, quiet greetings of people who trusted one another to carry weight. Light fell in long bars across the floor. Dust hung in the beams like patient snow. I stood with my hands in my pockets and felt the shape of the keys. I drove to the old neighborhood where Dad's hardware store used to stand. The new tenant sells tile. The window displays are careful and bright. I parked and sat for a while. Memory crowded the seat, gentle and sturdy. Dad had called numbers little compass needles. He said they point you where you need to go, if you stop pretending they are coins to be counted only once. I took a photo of the storefront and sent it to my brother. He replied with 2 words. Nice work. It read like a blessing. That afternoon, I walked the rows of our small office garden, a strip of soil by the loading bay. We planted herbs in old pallets, the wood sanded and painted by the night shift on a slow week. Basil, thyme, rosemary, mint. I watered them with a dented metal can and watched the leaves darken with gratitude. A driver came by to drop off a form and paused. Smells like my grandmother's yard, he said. That's the idea, I replied. Quiet revenge is not about bruising anyone. It is about building something that makes the injuries irrelevant. It is about letting competence speak in a room that once laughed at your voice. Buying the company where they worked did not feel like a trophy. It felt like correcting a map. When I lock up at night, I count the bays out of habit. I set the alarm and listen for the click. I drive home under streetlights that make everything look briefly silver. At my table, I open Mom's recipes and plan the meals for the week. On the counter, the binders rest, heavier than they were, and easier to carry. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below. And subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.